Jessica watched their expressions change. Her mother looked up first. You bought the venue? Jessica nodded. Last month. Silence filled the room. Her father quickly flipped through the documents again. The papers weren't a reservation. They were ownership records. The small lakeside estate where the wedding was supposed to take place had quietly gone up for sale after the previous owner retired. Jessica and Ethan had learned about it through a friend. Using years of savings, a small business loan, and Ethan's investment money, they had purchased it. The venue no longer belonged to a wedding company. It belonged to them. Her father looked stunned. Then, we couldn't have cancelled anything. Jessica shook her head. The manager accepted your phone call. She smiled calmly. But he also happens to work for me now. Nobody spoke. Her mother whispered. So the wedding is still happening? Yes. Chloe frowned. What about the deposit? Jessica looked at her. The refund was transferred into the venue's business account. Another silence. It never came to you. Chloe's face fell. So, my vacation. Jessica answered honestly. You'll have to pay for it yourself. Her sister stood abruptly. This is unbelievable. Jessica looked at her calmly. No. She smiled sadly. What was unbelievable was expecting my wedding to fund your holiday. Neither parent knew what to say. For the first time, their plan had completely failed. Then Ethan quietly walked through the front door. Jessica had asked him to wait outside. He carried another folder. He placed it gently on the coffee table. Her father looked confused. What's this? Ethan smiled politely. Our guest list. Jessica nodded. We've made one small change. Her mother looked relieved. Oh good. Jessica met her eyes. You won't be attending. The room became completely silent. What? Jessica took a deep breath. I spent years believing love meant constantly sacrificing. She looked at each of them. I was wrong. Her father frowned. We're your parents. Yes. And parents are supposed to support their children. Silence. Not ask one child to keep giving everything to the other. Her mother began crying. You'd really exclude your own family. Jessica's voice remained calm. I didn't. She paused. You excluded yourselves the moment you decided my wedding mattered less than a vacation. No one could argue with that. Even Chloe looked away. A week later, the wedding day arrived. The lakeside venue looked more beautiful than Jessica had imagined. White flowers lined the aisle. Music drifted gently across the water. Friends and Ethan's family filled every seat. There were 2 empty chairs in the back. Reserved. Not because Jessica expected her parents to come, but because, despite everything, she had hoped they might apologize. They never arrived. The ceremony was perfect. When the officiant pronounced Jessica and Ethan husband and wife, the applause echoed across the lake. Later that evening, Ethan raised a glass during the reception. I want to thank someone. Everyone looked toward him. My wife. Jessica smiled. He continued. Not because she planned an amazing wedding. He took her hand. But because she finally learned that setting boundaries doesn't make you selfish. It makes you healthy. The guests applauded. Months later, the venue became a successful wedding business owned by Jessica and Ethan. Ironically, couples came from across the state to celebrate the happiest day of their lives there. One afternoon, Jessica received a letter from her mother. Inside was a handwritten apology. No excuses. No requests. Just regret. Jessica read it quietly, folded it and placed it in a drawer. She wasn't ready to answer. Maybe one day she would be. Maybe she wouldn't. Forgiveness, she had learned, wasn't something that could be demanded. It had to be earned. As she locked the venue that evening, Ethan slipped his hand into hers. Any regrets? Jessica looked around the property they had built together. The place where people promised forever. Then she smiled. Only one. What's that? I should have stopped sacrificing my happiness a long time ago. Ethan kissed her forehead. Well. He smiled. You were right on time. Because sometimes the strongest response isn't revenge. It's refusing to let people keep treating your dreams like they matter less than their convenience. Months passed, then life settled into a rhythm Jessica had never thought possible. The wedding venue flourished through word of mouth, and nearly every weekend was booked months in advance. Couples often told Jessica they had chosen the property because it felt warm and welcoming instead of overly luxurious. She would smile, knowing that every flower planted, every light hung, and every chair arranged carried a piece of the future she and Ethan had built together. Their success wasn't measured only by profit but by the laughter that echoed across the lakeside every Saturday evening. For the first time in her life, Jessica wasn't living to meet someone else's expectations. She was building a life based on her own. One autumn afternoon, the receptionist walked into Jessica's office holding an envelope. Someone left this at the front gate, she said. The handwriting on the front was unmistakable. It was from Chloe. Jessica hesitated before opening it. Inside was a short letter. I don't expect you to forgive me. I just wanted you to know I never went to Europe. After everything happened, my friends left without me. I had to get a full-time job, and for the first time, I realized how much everyone had always done for me. I'm sorry for believing I deserved your sacrifices. There was no request for money and no excuses, only a quiet apology. A week later, Jessica's parents asked if they could meet her at a small cafe near the venue. Ethan offered to come, but Jessica gently shook her head. I think this is something I need to do myself. When she arrived, her parents were already waiting. They looked older than she remembered. Her father stood as she approached, but for a moment, none of them knew what to say. Finally, her mother spoke with tears in her eyes. We spent so many years calling you the responsible one that we forgot responsibility shouldn't be rewarded with more burdens. Jessica listened quietly. Her father looked down at his coffee. When you stopped calling, the house became very quiet, he admitted. We realized we'd always expected you to come back, apologize first, and fix everything. We never asked whether we were the ones who had broken it. Jessica had imagined this conversation many times, but hearing those words still caught her off guard. They weren't defending themselves. They were accepting responsibility. After a long silence, Jessica asked the question that had stayed with her since childhood. Did you ever notice that every time Chloe wanted something, I was the one expected to give it up? Her parents exchanged a painful glance. Her mother slowly nodded. We noticed. We convinced ourselves it was temporary. Then temporary became a habit. Before we realized it, we'd built a family where one daughter always carried the weight while the other never had to. Her father quietly added, there's no excuse for that. The conversation lasted nearly 3 hours. No miracles happened that afternoon. Years of hurt couldn't disappear over coffee. But something did change. For the first time, Jessica wasn't being asked to sacrifice her feelings to keep the peace. Her parents simply listened. Before leaving, her mother reached into her purse and handed Jessica a small box. Inside was the delicate pearl bracelet that had belonged to Jessica's grandmother. We should have given this to you on your wedding day, she whispered. We kept waiting for the right moment. We almost missed it. Several months later, Chloe surprised everyone by showing up at the venue, not as a guest, but as a volunteer during a charity event Jessica and Ethan hosted for couples who couldn't afford a wedding. Chloe spent the entire day setting tables, cutting decorations, and cleaning afterward without being asked. As the event ended, she quietly walked over to Jessica. I used to think people loved me because I deserved it, she admitted. Now I know they loved me because you kept giving up pieces of yourself. I'm trying to become someone who deserves a second chance. Jessica looked at her sister for a long moment before smiling gently. Second chances don't happen in one day. Chloe nodded. I know. Then she picked up another stack of chairs and returned to work. It wasn't a dramatic reunion, but it was a beginning. Sometimes trust isn't rebuilt with words. It's rebuilt through consistent actions. On the first anniversary of their wedding, Jessica and Ethan stood alone by the lake after the last guests had gone home. The lights reflected across the water exactly as they had the night they became husband and wife. Ethan slipped his arm around her shoulders. "A year ago, you thought you were losing everything," he said softly. Jessica smiled as she looked across the property. "Instead, I found out who was willing to stand beside me when it mattered." In the distance, her parents and Chloe were helping the staff fold chairs after volunteering for the evening. The road back to becoming a family was still long, but this time, everyone was finally walking it together. And that, Jessica realized, was worth more than any perfect wedding could ever have been.